Hello and welcome to India News TV. Lately, we have seen tens of thousands of farmers from the state of Punjab and Haryana marching towards the national capital and threatening not to move back until the three agricultural reform bills which have been passed by the Indian Parliament in the month of September are rolled back. Firstly, it seeks to break the monopolies of government-regulated mandis and enables the farmers to sell their produce directly to the private buyers. Secondly, it establishes a legal framework for farmers to enter in a contract with large enterprises and produce for them. Thirdly, it enables the agrarian businesses to stockpile food articles and removes the ability of the government to impose restrictions on them. The first major concern which the farmers have is the fear of losing minimum support price. Right now, the government provides in the government-regulated mandis to the farmers something called a minimum support price on essential commodities. However, there is no such assurance of MSP in the private mandis which the government seeks to establish. So the farmers fear that at a time when the private mandis don't carry any cess or taxes, everybody will be attracted to these private mandis, and over the time, it will lead to a collapse of public mandis, or in other words, the government-regulated mandis, and the minimum support price which such mandis offers. And at that time, the large private enterprises might exploit the farmers. Another apprehension of the farmers is the three-level grievance redressal mechanism. In the government-regulated mandis, any unfair practice can be reported to APMC officers who are mostly in the yard itself. However, according to the new bill, in the private mandis, if there is any unfair practice, the farmers will have to go all the way to the sub-divisional magistrate court to lodge a complaint. Farmers consider this as beyond their financial ability. To understand the substance in such apprehensions, I spoke to Mr. Karan Bhasin, who is a famous Indian economic analyst and a policy researcher. Here's a look. So Karan, first of all, welcome to the interaction. Your thoughts and insights into the policy is more important than ever when we are seeing a large sort of divide in the way how people take this policy. We've got a sector of population who thinks that these agricultural reforms are another 1991 type liberalization reforms. And then we've got another sect which believes that, reforms like these will lead to a wide-scale exploitation of farmers by large corporates. How do you see this?
I think the discussion on these laws primarily has been skewed and has been based on perceptions rather than facts. And I think that's one of the only reasons why we are having these polarizing opinions come into play. The way I look at these reforms, and mind you, I want to begin with the fact that farmers are being exploited, but not by corporations, but mostly by middlemen. There's this mandi tax, and large sort of enough traders in mandis distort markets. They try to manipulate it to their advantage, and in the end, farmer does not get their due despite APMCs and MSPs coming in. A lot of people also have the fear that the new laws might mean that APMCs and MSPs might be removed, which is not true at all. The new laws don't mention APMCs or MSPs because they have nothing to do with APMCs or MSPs. What the new laws essentially mean or imply is that what the government is saying is that now there will be private markets that will coexist with the mandi system. And when that happens, farmers have the freedom to decide that whether they want to sell in a private market or at a mandi market. Now, any farmer will sell at a private market only when the price being offered is better than what he's getting at the mandi system. That's basic economics. So there's no question of, MSPs being taken away or of, prices falling, because in any case, farmers have the comfort of going through the APMC route. And one of the biggest advantages of this particular policy is that it allows farmers to directly trade across the country. So, if a farmer realizes, and now we have this market platform called eNAM, which gives price information on a real-time basis to farmers. And if a farmer realizes that, okay, I'm sitting here in Punjab, but paddy's rate in Assam is far more than what I'm getting over here, even if I account for the transportation cost. So he can make a greater sort of profit by shipping his product and selling it to Assam rather than selling it at either the local mandi or the local private market. So access to private markets across the country is going to ensure better price realization for all farmers, irrespective of their land holdings. And I think that's the biggest uh, advantage this bill or this law brings to the table.
Currently, they've got either of the platform. Either they can go to the public mandis or to these big corporate enterprises, which the sort of government has opened the doors to. But the apprehensions of the farmers is that, initially, of course, it will be very attractive for them because these, private enterprises and the transactions don't carry any cesses and taxes. But down the track, what it will do is that it will lead to a collapse of the public sort of mandis because nobody will be going over there. And as a result, the MSPs which they offer will no longer be there. Now, what the farmers are demanding is that a legal sort of status to MSPs. So how do you respond to that?
No, see, MSPs never had a legal status in the country. It's an administrative exercise. You can't put a legal status to an exercise which has to be flexible by its very nature, because governments have to decide MSPs on an annual basis. So there's the CACP which determines the cost of production and recommends MSP to the government. Government then adopts or changes to the MSP recommendations, and then it decides how much to procure in different parts of the country. Now, this decision of how much to procure, what MSP, etc., these are quintessentially administrative exercises that change on a year-to-year basis. So even if you have a guarantee of an MSP, you cannot codify the price, which means that price that government offers today might be different tomorrow. So you cannot have these laws. Second thing is that wherever there's a law like this which guarantees a price, even for private transactions, it does not work. Economics does not function that way because markets are strong enough to determine their own price, and they find a way to price things properly. So those legislations don't work. They haven't worked anyway. As far as the concerns of long-term nature, that are long-term in nature, we need to recognize that India has a public distribution system and India has a Food Security Act. And to meet with those, sort of commitments that India has made to its poor and vulnerable, we have to procure. We have to procure today. We have to procure tomorrow. We have to procure 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. So this entire talk of MSPs being collapsed are not at all relevant because MSPs and APMCs will coexist independent of private markets. Now, it may well be the case that private markets offer an attractive price over the APMCs in the start. But in that particular case, government will also have to step up procurement because it has to meet the supply stock that it has to maintain for food security measures and so on and so forth. So this entire concern and apprehension, I think, is based on a very limited understanding of the Indian state, of the public distribution system, and of what the government is doing. So, because of Food Security Act, we can safely say that the Indian government has to procure, and if it has to procure, then it will procure through APMCs. And mind you, Prime Minister himself has said that there will not be a situation where APMCs will be done away with. So, with him making that statement, I think that should put to rest all apprehensions because he has made the intention of the government very clear that APMCs, MSPs will coexist. And that is what the law says. That is what the law actually intends to do. It wants to have competition between private markets and APMCs because that competition in itself will ensure that APMCs are forced to reforms. There's a big resistance within APMCs to reduce mandi tax to become more efficient. That entire process will be streamlined. If more people are going through private mandis, APMCs will have to lower the mandi tax. They will have to ensure better price realization. Even in APMCs and MSPs, farmers don't really get home the MSP because they have to pay the tax and they have to, pay a particular amount to transport the commodity. And over and above that, a lot of the times APMCs do not absorb the entire supply. So they may say that, your quality is not proper, so we'll pay you for 80% of it, but we'll procure 100% of it. So those kind of transactions also happen. Now those will stop because APMCs now know that should they intervene or should those big players in APMCs try to exploit farmers in this manner, farmers have an option to go to the private markets. And I think that's the big thing that we need to really understand, that APMCs in itself are an exploitative system, which is why this competition is essential towards ensuring that farmers' exploitation from middlemen can be stopped. So this is not a move that will exploit farmers, but on the contrary, this is a move that will prevent their exploitation.
So, Karan, I mean, you explained it very well, but even though it has been the bone of contention between the farmers and the government, that there should be some sort of an assurance that tomorrow, if they go out to these private enterprises, and there is no sort of regulation over there, the government doesn't have sort of any intervention of what's happening over there, they might get exploited. And the government, it's just an announcement made by the Prime Minister, but they haven't sort of put forth anything legally or anything in writing. So don't you think that there could be a possibility tomorrow that this will lead to exploitation, which has been sort of the main concern for all the farmers across Punjab and Haryana?
Not at all, because there are three bills. First of it relates to setting up of private markets. Second bill in turn is basically farmers' protections and price assurance. So the very purpose of the bill is to ensure that it strengthens the rights of farmers. It enables contract farming, which gives them price assurance, and it creates a speedy dispute resolution mechanism, which again protects the interest of the farmers. So there are three bills. First bill looks at allowing private markets. Second bill strengthens the rights of the farmers. It ensures that farmers are, given their due recognition in the form of enforceable rights, and it proposes and now it's a law, so it does not propose, but it puts in place a dispute resolution mechanism that is geared towards protecting the interests of the farmer. So there's a proper law which has come into force precisely to achieve this. And I think that is what, we need to keep explaining to people, that these concerns have been addressed by the laws which have been brought in. So we have to keep that in mind. This entire thing about the Price Assurance Act, I just want to make a quick comment here that people say that contract farming you have enabled, so that might lead to exploitation because big farmers, small farmers may not be able to bargain with big farmers. That's actually not true. In the case of India, we have Amul, which buys from a lot of dairy producers, but it specializes only on food processing, marketing, and supply distribution. As a consequence, the farmers that supply to Amul have actually gained every year in terms of their income. And that model has been very successful. And that happened without, these formal protection of rights, assurances, and legal framework. Now that we have this, we can scale up that model and create multiple such examples. And I think that's the way to go. We need to recognize that for farmers who have less land holdings, less than 2 hectares, it is important to empower them and at the same time ensure that they are a part of an efficient and effective supply distribution mechanism. So farmers cannot be asked to set up their own marketing companies, distribution, logistics, etc. That is where we need private expertise to come in. And that private expertise will benefit the farmers, as it has in the case of Amul. And there are so many other examples. There's an example even of Malaysia palm oil and so on and so forth. So it's a cross-country experience that goes behind putting in these laws. And I think noted agricultural experts such as Ashok Gulati have been asking for these reforms for many decades. He's been writing on it, and he's produced huge amount of literature on its benefits. We really need to trust the government enough to know that what it is doing is actually for the benefit, and we will realize these benefits over the coming few years. As it so happens, this year itself, even after these laws being brought in, government has procured a record number of paddy, wheat, etc., and it has given us a decent increment in MSPs. So we have seen these laws come into existence, and at the same time the old mechanism is functioning efficiently while this coexists. So those concerns, I think, are not really something that are valid, but I think they're based because people are not really aware of different provisions of these laws, these 3 different laws.
You're indeed right in saying that experts such as Mr. Ashok Gulati have sort of compared these reforms to the ones which happened in 1991. But at the same time, we have been seeing some people saying that, maybe these experts are over sort of looking the abilities of the farmer. And don't forget, in 2006, such a similar sort of, thing was done wherein, public mandis were bypassed and, farmers in Bihar were made to negotiate straight away with these big enterprises. And 2010 onwards, we have been sort of experiencing a continuous decline in the farmer's income in Bihar. So how do you see that? What were some of the factors which has led to that? And could that be on India-wide scale?
So it's a very important question that you have raised, and a lot of people talk about this. See, whenever there's a reform, what you need is economies of scale for it to be fruitful. Now, when you did it in Bihar, the expectation was that private sector will come in and make the entire system efficient. But Bihar as a state, it might have a huge population, but it does not have the kind of return that would attract private capital. And because that capital did not come in, the system did not work. In contrast, now that we're doing it at a national level, there are scales, there are economies of scales that are possible, which is why we will see greater investments in distribution, supply, logistics, etc., which will ensure that farmers will gain. That's the fundamental difference between the Bihar example and the national example. Second thing is that, as is the case in Bihar, procurement was always very limited compared to states of Punjab and Haryana. So I think we need to recognize that even though government does offer MSPs, a lot of the procurement is restricted to 2-3 select states, which is a very unfair policy in itself, but that is what it is.
Which states are these? Punjab, Haryana, and
Punjab, Haryana. Yeah. These are the states.
Yes.
So that's also one factor which needs to be kept in mind. Given that we are procuring a lot from Punjab and Haryana, and that we will continue to do so, APMCs will continue to exist in these states. Mind you, there are a lot of states that actually don't even have APMCs. So yet the system functions well. On the concerns that farmers may not have the ability, I strongly disagree with that premise that we are overestimating the ability of farmers, because there is adequate evidence. Amul is one example. We know Big Basket, etc., are procuring directly from farmers. It's resulted in income growth of people who are producing vegetables, which actually do not get MSPs. So there has been an increase in price realization of broccoli and whatnot in these areas.
When I say you are overlooking the ability of farmers, what I mean is also in part the 3-tier grievance redressal system, wherein you can only go to sub-divisional magistrate, DM, and then the joint secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, but you can't go to court, something of that sort. So this is also when we're talking about those illiterate farmers from some rural part of the country, how would you expect them to enter into contract with these big enterprises and negotiate something which is beneficial to them? So and we've got 14 crore households in India who are dependent upon agriculture.
So these concerns were also raised during the time of Amul. These concerns were also raised when palm oil cooperatives were set up in foreign countries. But at the end of the day, these concerns, there's little empirical evidence to suggest that they're valid. See, a farmer is very smart. He knows that, okay, I need to produce this much, this is the price assured, and I need to deliver in this time frame, and this is the amount that I'm going to get. It's a very simple contract, and standardized contracts as per the second law can be formulated in that manner. In the event of a dispute, the reason why he has to go to the DM and so on and so forth and not the courts is because we want a speedy resolution for the farmer, because this is a perishable item. We cannot subject the farmer or expect him to hire a lawyer, go to a court to fight his battle, and court battles take a long time. So when it comes to contract enforcement, especially for farmers who produce perishable items, we need a speedy resolution mechanism. And that resolution mechanism is what has been proposed, because a district magistrate or a sub-district magistrate is there on ground. He can discuss, he can, he's much more accessible, and he would be better equipped to ensure enforcement of contracts. See, the key concern is not really entering into contracts, because farmers will be able to get these 3 issues, and I think they're smart enough to understand these 3 issues, which is precisely why Amul is such a successful example. The concern was always enforcement of contract, and the mechanism that has been put in place, I think, addresses it to a great deal. Mind you, these reforms are never static. They're always dynamic. Should there be issues in enforcement of contract, government is not, and I don't think anyone is ever saying that reforms cannot be tweaked as we go along. If there's any roadblock that comes in in terms of enforcement of contracts, government can always make changes and strengthen the rights further if needed. But the protests at the moment that are happening in India are not happening for either strengthening the enforcement mechanism or for further ensuring that contract negotiations can be done in a much more efficient mechanism, but they're skewed in an entirely different direction, which incidentally the laws are not really even talking about.
So Karan, now on that note, let me ask you my last question, and it's a pretty broad question, which is that do you see the farmers and all the protests and agenda they have, do you think that this is all politically driven, or do they have some serious, genuine concerns? If at all, do you think that there are any?
You see, I do believe that to an extent these protests are politically motivated. We just got news reports of the Shaheen Baghdadi going to these protests. Of course, they are politically motivated, and they have been done by the likes of eminent thinkers such as P. Sainath and Yogendra Yadav, who incidentally have no expertise on agricultural matters, but they seem to be championing the cause for the moment. But I will not disregard the entire protest by saying that it's all politically motivated. I'm sure there would be several farmers who have multiple questions about these reforms in different parts of the country, and I do feel that it's the responsibility of the government to address those concerns, and it is trying to communicate to them as much as possible. So while there is a political angle to it, and I think that's a big chunk of the protest, I also believe that the entire drive of misinformation has led to confusion within the mind of genuine farmers. I also feel that this is the season where probably farmers do not have the ability to sit on a protest. They're too busy at this part of the year. So a lot of the protesters might also actually be middlemen who will invariably lose out if they don't reform the APMC system and become efficient. So we also need to understand at the end of the day that middlemen are not serving the interest of either the farmer or the consumer, because they're taking away a major chunk of the difference between what a consumer pays and the farmer pays. And I keep giving this example that people want MSPs to be legalized. There's an administrative angle, flexibility, etc. Those are issues, but there's a far more philosophical issue. What happens if today, a steel producer comes and decides to walk to the borders of Delhi and block it and says that I also want MSPs and government should produce whatever I produce, how much I produce at the same guaranteed price? What stops people in services industry from doing the same? I doubt if MSPs is the de facto support that other countries provide to their farmers. When MSP was introduced, there were two twin objectives: A, achieve food security; B, give income support. We have achieved food security in this country. And for income support, we have an alternative mechanism of PM Kisan, Samman Nidhi Yojana. So the question is that while MSPs and APMCs continue, we are performing a critical function of MSP through different routes. At the same time, we are giving MSPs. So let us not try to think that government is trying to take things away from the farmers, where it is in fact trying to empower them and ensure better price realization for them. So in a nutshell, I do believe genuinely and sincerely, and based on my expertise, based on whatever I've done over the last couple of years, whatever I've read over the years, these laws are for the benefit of farmers. And I think it's important to communicate and to inform them of the potential benefits that lie ahead because of these laws.
On that note, I do think that this will be something like 1991, revolutionizing. Thank you very much for talking to us, and it was a pleasure talking to you, and we got to know a lot about these reforms which have been brought in by the government. Thanks a lot, Karan.
Pleasure being here. Thanks.
Thanks for watching the video. If you like it, please press the like button, share your views in the comment section, and please subscribe to India News TV for more such updates.